to do this. My name is Remie Laenen. As Jim mentioned here, I'm 97 years old, born back in 1926 in that lovely country of Belgium in Europe.
If I could interject
Sure.
here, Ray, we're at the offices this morning of the Retired and Senior Volunteer Program. It's at 16931 19 Mile Road, Clinton Township, Michigan. My name is Jim Pachuki and I'm the interviewer this morning. Our videographer today is Joe Lamage. Also in attendance are Elizabeth Hauer and Dolores Baumgarten, also of the RSVP program. And as you started, Ray, we appreciate you coming in. And if we could just now continue your story.
Okay.
We appreciate everything we can learn.
Well, as I just mentioned a few moments ago, I was born in Belgium in 1926 at the age of a year and a half old. My mother and father brought me over here to the United States. I grew up on the east side of Detroit. I went to a Catholic school in that area.
Which school?
St. Rose, which coincidentally was the school which Neil Shine, former publisher of the Free Press, also attended, and who I know very well. I completed my schooling, high school schooling, grade and high school schooling there, and in 1944, June, I graduated. Approximately 3 weeks later, I was inducted into the United States Army and was taken down to Fort Sheridan, Illinois.
Were you drafted, Joe? Or
I was drafted, yes, sir. I was drafted. I tried to get into the V5 program for the Naval Air Corps and also the Army Air Corps, and unfortunately found out at that time, much to my surprise and dismay, that I was colorblind. And my first recognition of this was, as I say, was with the Navy. And I was astonished that I couldn't pick out the numbers and figures in those sheets with all the little different colors. And I thought, well, I didn't make it here at the Navy, but I'll go to the Army Air Corps, and now I'm presuming that I'm going to have to face the same problem, but maybe I can sort of get around it. After passing the mental test, proceeded to take this test with the color blindness, and as I looked down there, I recognized, I can't read, but oh yeah, that's a 6. Sir, what was that you saw there? Or maybe, it's an 8. That's an 8. No, sir, it's not an 8. Well, he obviously knew that I was trying to get through. So that was the condition in which I lost getting into the Air Corps. So at that point, I went into the Army in July of 1944, and as I say, I ended up down at Fort Sheridan, which was the induction center in Illinois. And then they shipped us over to Fort Riley, Kansas. Fort Riley, Kansas is a cavalry replacement center, and it's located in Junction City, which is just west of Kansas City. And I'll never forget it. I can't believe it's 60 years ago already, but I'm sitting at a table just like that being interviewed by a sergeant, and after getting all the details of my life and so forth and what I did in my upon graduating from school and before, he says, as you know, this is a cavalry replacement training center. I said, yes. And he says, now I'm going to ask you, which would you prefer? Would you prefer the mechanized cavalry or the horse cavalry? And I was astonished. I thought he was joking with me. Horse cavalry. I thought that, that was with the John Wayne days, and no, you're kidding me. No, I'm not kidding. I'm very serious. You wish the mechanized or the horse cavalry? And I said, well, obviously a mechanized cavalry must entail what? Tanks and mechanized vehicles? Yes. And the horse cavalry, what are we going to do with the horse cavalry in this war? He says, well, you're going to take 17 weeks of basic training if you wish to go into the horse cavalry. Well, if I have my druthers, I'll take the horse cavalry. That sounded like a glamorous thing to do, to learn. I rode a horse before I went into the service, not very much, but I did know how to ride a horse. So 17 weeks of horse training, horse cavalry in the hills of Kansas was really nice duty. We had our breeches and boots. I thought we looked rather glamorous in that attire as opposed to the regular pants and so forth that the other men wore. And upon completion of the basic training, we came home and had a 10-day furlough. And after the furlough, they shipped us out to Fort Ord, Kansas. Fort Ord, California. And after spending a couple of weeks out there, on New Year's Eve, 1945, they placed us aboard a converted Liberty ship with 317 mules. Now you're going to say, wait a minute, 317 mules on a converted Liberty ship? Come on. Well, we were rather surprised ourselves, but we recognized this ship was outfitted for that particular purpose. Now, just to digress a little bit, mules were used in World War II in two theaters of war. One was in Italy and one was in Burma, the Chinese Burma theater. And the reason for that was because it's a very mountainous area and it's not conducive to truck travel. The roads are narrow, bumpy, mountainous, up and down, and the mules worked very, very well in this terrain. And we were going to convey these 317 mules aboard this converted Liberty ship to Calcutta, India, which would take 60 days. Very slow with a Liberty ship, approximately 8, 9, 10 knots an hour. And upon arrival in Calcutta, we were going to take these mules and place them on a rail to the Burma road border of Pakistan, or at that time was India. At which time we, as experienced horse people, were going to take these mules over the Burma road into China. Now at this time, you're looking at the first of the year, 1945. The war was still on. It was still 5 months before the conclusion in Europe. And we were going to actually face the Japanese in this area and work our way to China. Now it took 30 days to get to Melbourne, Australia. And with an overnight stay in Melbourne, Australia, we got aboard the ship again, and we went around the southern bight of Australia into the Indian Ocean. And 8 days out of Melbourne, Australia, on the 6th of February, 1945, 2 torpedoes slammed into our ship at about 10 o'clock in the evening. Everything went dark. I was below with my other. This ship carried 175 men. We were cavalrymen, as we were, our contingent. We had some Air Force men who were merely being taken to Karachi, India. We had the armed guard, we had the merchant marine, who were, of course, had control of the ship. Well, when all these lights went out, there was a air duct above me and came down and hit me across the bridge of my nose. Didn't knock me out, or I would not be conveying or telling you the story. The staircase, which was immediately adjacent to our bedding area, had blown away with the concussion. But there was a ladder, which is put there on purpose, for that very purpose, in case of this a situation like this. We climbed out of the lower holes with the ladder, and we went to our battle stations. And upon arrival at our battle stations, the captain of the ship, with his megaphone, announced the fact that we had been torpedoed, which was quite obvious, and that to please hold on to an area somewhere, permanent piece of area, because we probably will get another torpedo. And it was not shortly thereafter when we got the other torpedo. At that time, the captain announced, "Abandon ship, abandon ship." We were at our battle stations, and I was right there by a lifeboat, and the lifeboat was being lowered into the ocean, and when it got to the bottom into the water, it was recognized that somebody had left the petcocks open of that lifeboat, and we were taking on water. At this juncture, it's very dark. This was at 10:15 at night. And I looked out over the dark ocean, and I saw lights out there, and I looked up at this ship, which was back and forth, back and forth. It was quite obvious. We recognized that the forward portion of that ship had broken off with that last torpedo, and that it was already sinking. I know that from experience, when you're near that close to a sinking ship, if that sinking ship continues to sink and you are in that immediate area, you will get sucked down with it. I dove off the lifeboat and swam out to those lights out there. There were mules swimming around in the area. After all, there were 317. Not all of them were in the water, but there were some of them in the water. When I reached the area where these lights were, I recognized there were two lifeboats that were tethered together. And there were I found out later, that there were approximately 30 men in the one lifeboat, and in the other lifeboat, which was practically submerged, there were two. And as I crawled into this mess of survivors, all of a sudden I heard chung, 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 chung. And I peered over the side of the gunwale, and it was the submarine had surfaced and was scanning the waters with the lights. And I said, "Oh my God. Here I am, 18 years old, in the middle of an ocean. The submarine which sank our Liberty ship is now surfacing and is scanning the waters." And I had heard of stories where submarines had surfaced and killed the survivors, both Japanese and German. And I'm thinking, here I am, 18 years old, my father, my brother, my mother. This could well be the last few moments of my life. But the submarine just passed us along, went on its way. The next morning, daylight, and we recognized that lifeboat, which was tethered to us, one of the survivors had died, and the other one was still alive, but that the water was practically over the bilge of the lifeboat. We had the first mate aboard our ship, I should say our lifeboat, and he said, "This is very foolish. Here we have two lifeboats. One is filled like sardines, and the other one has two survivors, even though one has perished, but it's almost completed filled with water. Let's bail that one out and separate these 30 survivors, which we did. We bailed out that other one, and he proceeded to take, you get over there, you get over there, you get over there, you get over there. Now, if I may digress just for a moment, please. I have a very unusual experience that I'm going to interject at this time, which necessitates a digression of. When I was going to St. Rose School, a friend of mine who had met for the first time in the 5th grade a man by the name of Tom Sherhart. We completed our schooling together. Very nice young man. Grew up together. We graduated together. We were only 3 days apart in our ages. April 15, 1926. April 18, 1926. We graduated together. We went into the service together. We went to Fort Sheridan together. We went to Fort Riley together. We took our basic training together. We came home together. We went out to Fort Ord together. We got aboard the same ship. And he was in that lifeboat at that moment. Now, at the time of the separation by the first mate, you get over there, you get over there, you get over there. He instructs Tom to get over there. I immediately want to follow. No, we're about even here. I know, but that's my friend. I've known him all my life. Don't worry about it. We're together. We're in separate lifeboats, but we're going to be tethered together. We're just about even. You stay right here. I thought this was very ominous that we were being separated for the first time after all these years. The lifeboats were tethered together. We knew that we didn't, but the first mate knew that we were approximately 1,000 miles off the coast of Australia, the west coast of Australia. We had a compass, we had a sail, and we had a rudder. We set the course for due east. The first night, it was obvious because they only had 10 in their lifeboat. We had 20 in our lifeboat. The difference in the weight had a bearing on how we could keep these two boats in one together. And it was recognized that it would be much better if we separate and the lighter boat go on, and if they get picked up before we do, or if they recognize that they're going to be picked up, they know where we are. And that's what it was. First night, they were over the horizon and we were separated. And that was my friend Tom, who was in that lifeboat. 5, 6, 7 days have passed. You're going to ask, well, what did you eat? What did you have for food? Did you have water? Yes, we had food. Food, which amounted to a few candy bars, some hard crackers. We had round, small round tins, looked like a miniature tin of tuna fish, but it was pemmican. Now, pemmican was a highly concentrated food, raisins, coconut, that kind of thing. The food lasted no more than approximately about, it was around 8, 9 days, minimal use. But we had water. Thank God we had water. And the water was in large tins, square tins like that, about this long. And that water was given to us in small, very small quantities. This would be a large amount of water that which we would have in a day. My God, it just tastes good. Thank God we had the water. Okay. 8, 9, 10 days pass. We had recognized an airplane and we set up flares, hoping that they would recognize us, but they didn't. 11, 12, 13, 14 days pass, and at this time we're starting to get rather nervous. But unbelievably, a school of whales entered the area and actually came around a boat. And I thought, my gosh, here we have survived a torpedoing. We've been out here for 12 days, and now we recognize that there was a school of whales who are obviously very inquisitive and are coming around our lifeboat, including going under the lifeboat. They went on their merry way. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 days pass, and at this juncture we're beginning to very much hallucinate. We're seeing things. There's a ship out there. There's a plane up there. At night, there's a lighthouse out there. I bet that's Australia. But we're hallucinating. These are all pure hallucinations. Nerves are beginning to fray. When you see a lifeboat that is like this, with 20 survivors packed like sardines for a period of time that I've just been expressing to you, you're shoulder to shoulder, you begin to can't stand to have somebody touching you like that. And we had to, the 20 of us, take our turns going around to the stern of that lifeboat. Where there was this rudder, there was the compass. And we had to keep that on a due east course. And you had to sit there for 2 hours, move on, and your next survivor took over. You were constantly in water. That was in the area of about the 6 to 8 inches of water, constantly. You were like this all the time, and that's like, as you can see right here. As you will see later on, I'll show you. You're like this. 20 days, 21 days, 22 days have passed. And we're sitting there at about 11 o'clock in the morning, and there's a captain aboard our ship, aboard our lifeboat. His name was Captain Rutz. He was 49 years old. Gray beard, gray. And at 49 years, he was an old man compared to an 18-year-old. And he was sitting there, and all of a sudden, we're sitting there like this. You hear him saying, "There's a ship out there. There's a ship out there." Yeah, it's the captain's turn to hallucinate. It's his turn. We looked up at the captain. "I tell you, there's a ship out there." There is a ship out there. And it started to circle us, coming around. And as it got closer to us, we recognized that it was an aircraft carrier, a small aircraft carrier. We recognized the planes on the deck, and you could see a circular insignia. And it appeared to be the insignia of a Japanese plane, a red insignia. We thought, here we've been out here for 22 days. This apparently is a Japanese aircraft carrier, which is circling us. But as it got closer to us, it wasn't red, it was red, white, and blue. It was a British aircraft carrier, the HMS Activity. And it was circling us, and got closer and closer and closer. This picture was taken from that aircraft carrier at the time our lifeboat was up alongside. And they were bringing us up with a cargo net. But Ray Laenen, 18 years old, muscular, thinks he's a Tarzan. I'm not waiting to get up in that cargo net. I'm climbing up that rope that they've got, that rope net they got up there. And I get to the top. And they just held on. God grabbed me, and I started to pass out. I was so fortunate. Had I passed out anywhere between there, I could have fallen down and killed myself. But they placed me aboard, and I had passed out. The HMS Activity, as I say, the British aircraft carrier's next destination was to be in Sydney, over on the east coast of Australia. But because the captain recognized that he had picked up 20 survivors who had been out there for 22 days and had one of his own crewmen come down with an emergency appendectomy, said, we're going to the nearest port, which is Perth, Fremantle, on the west coast. In a day, we were there. Day and a half. They immediately placed us in a hospital, a military hospital, the Hollywood Military Hospital in Perth, Australia. My first concern was, who was picked up? There was a lifeboat picked up in 5 days, one picked up in 6 days, one picked up in rafts were picked up in 7 days. We were picked up in 22 days. There was one remaining lifeboat out there, and that was the lifeboat which was tethered to us and which, more importantly to me, contained my friend Tom Sherhart. We're recuperating in the hospital. 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, each day. Any word on that last lifeboat? No. 8 days. Still no word? No. How ominous this was, how ironic this was to be separated after all these years from my friend Tom. And now I survived. My family and his family were very close all these years, especially now, the fact that we had gone off to war together. And I'm thinking, now I've got to go back to the United States and tell his parents how this was separated, and that Tom didn't make it, but I was fortunate enough to make it. 9 days, 10 days passed. I was in a 4-bed ward. And that morning, the bed which was adjacent to mine, which was vacated by an Australian soldier, and was now left vacated. I went down to the end of the hallway to the lavatory, and as I returned to my bed, I recognized that there was somebody sitting on the edge of that bed which was vacated. An emaciated figure sitting like this. I look at him. It looks like they put a Japanese prisoner of war in that bed next to me, which was vacated this morning. When I get closer, and I look at this emaciated figure, he looks at me and says, "Is that you, Ray?" I said, is that you, Tom? With my friend Tom. He was out there for 32 days. Had been picked up by an American submarine 5 miles off the coast of Australia, northwest coast of Australia, and brought down into that military hospital and placed into that bed adjacent to me. Those are the 10 survivors of that And this is Tom. My friend Tom. They were picked up by the USS Rock, an American submarine, not more than a few miles off the coast of Australia, and taken down to the Perth Military Hospital, otherwise known as Hollywood Military Hospital, and placed into that bed next to mine.
Which one are you in that picture? Rick?
In this picture here, that's me right there. You can see we're so packed in there, but I've got me right there. That's my head right there. That's my head. And that's the first mate right here. He's the one who obviously knew where we were when we were torpedoed. And he's the one who instructed us to sever those two lifeboats, and which made this particular lifeboat, which had my friend 10. Now these are photos of the lifeboats that were picked up in the early days, the first few days, and also the rafts which were picked up in 7 days. Yeah. This, by the way, is a piece of the sail on our lifeboat with a red sail, and that'll be with me and my future generations ad infinitum. And it clearly says, Ray Laenen, 22 days, picked up by the HMS Activity, February 28, 1945, was USS Peter Sylvester, which was the name of our Liberty ship, sunk February 6, 1945. That's my tale of experience.
What an experience.
So if there's any other questions you'd like to ask me relative to my war career or my...
Sure. What happened after that?
I'm glad you asked. We were in Australia. Now mind you, at this juncture, when we were torpedoed, it was the 6th of February, and we got to Australia. We were in Australia for approximately 5 months. And the war was still on, and the war in Europe ended in May. And as I say, we were still in Australia, but now they wanted to prepare for the invasion of Japan, which was slated for November 1945. And so what we did, we took the train from Perth to Brisbane and boarded a troop ship there in Brisbane. And we went up to New Guinea, the northern coast of New Guinea, on our way to the Philippines, Manila, where we were going to prepare and train for the invasion, as I said, which was scheduled for November of 1945.
Now, you are cavalry.
Yes, we were cavalry.
But you had no animals at this point.
No, at this point, no. All we were going to do were just going to be replacements. We would probably be placed into an infantry replacement or artillery replacement when we got into the Philippines. Mm-hmm. Just as we got on the north side of New Guinea, August, everybody knows when they dropped the atomic bomb. And we were aboard that troop ship when this occurred. Obviously, in retrospect, this was what ended the war. No question about that.
How did you hear?
We were aboard.
Okay.
I'll never forget. I was looking over the side of the ship when it came up. Hey, did you hear they dropped a real big bomb over in Japan? In a place called Hiroshima. Oh, yeah? Well, we knew they've been dropping bombs over there ever since the Doolittle episode in Tokyo. We didn't know it was an atomic bomb. But this was a tremendous bomb. They tell me that, my God, that city has practically been decimated. Wow, what kind of a bomb would do that? Well, of course, Hirohito was approached and said, hey, you know, if you want to end the war, you can end the war. No, we're going to continue. And there's no question that this would have tragedy upon tragedy. Had that bomb never been dropped, millions would have been lost their lives, including Japanese and Americans, the populace of Japan, and other parts of that area. And so when they dropped the second bomb, that obviously ended the war. We continued on to Manila, and I stayed there for another year because I had just been in the war. I had only been in the service about July, maybe 8 months or so, 9 months. And so I stayed in the Philippines until August 1946, when I was discharged. You might ask, what about Tom? What happened to Tom? When we got to the Philippines, there was an inducement added to rejoining the Army for a period of time. And that inducement was that it would allow you to go back home, back to the service, back to your home in the United States, and stay there for, a couple months, and then you could select any theater in the world where they had Army. And he was just fascinated by this. He said, "Ray, let's do that. I said, "Gee, Christmas, you're asking to join the Army again now for a couple more years just so you can go to wherever, Germany or Japan or wherever?" "Yeah, but we get home now." "I know, Tom, but when I go home, I want to stay home. I'm not going over it. You're serious about this?" I says, "I'm sure serious about it." Well, that's where we separated, because he went home, and the funny part about it was he had to go through physical examination because all our records were lost in the sinking. And when they asked him, had he incurred or was he faced with any kind of war activity, he said, "Oh yeah, oh sure." He said, "I was torpedoed and I spent 32 days in a lifeboat." "You did? 32 days in a lifeboat?" "Yeah, 32 days in a lifeboat." "Wow, well, we can get you a physical examination." Well, make a long story short, he was sent home. He got a disability discharge. And my decision to stay in the Philippines, because I figured we'd be going home shortly, I wasn't that lucky. But I stayed another year in the Philippines.
What did you do while you were there?
All right, in the Philippines, I was a clerk. We were at U.S., what they called AFWESPAC headquarters. It was Armed Forces Western Pacific headquarters in Manila. And I was a clerk, typist and so forth, worked in the headquarters. And I did this for about 6 months. And an interesting opening developed. A fellow who was a chauffeur for a brigadier general was going home. He had enough points. And he was going back to the United States. I didn't have enough points. I had only been in for about a year and a half at that juncture. And he says, "How would you like to drive for this general?" I said, "You got to be kidding." "Yeah," he says, "I can select a chauffeur. I could recommend you to the general, and I'm sure you'd have no trouble doing that." I said, "Boy, if I can drive for the general, I'll take that, sure." So he got a hold of Brigadier General, and he introduced me to him, and the general liked what he saw, and he says, "You're going to be my chauffeur." I said, "Okay." And I had the luxury of driving a nice new Plymouth four-door sedan, drove him wherever he had to be, and on evenings where he didn't have to use the car, he says, "If you want to use the car, Ray," he says, "you go right ahead and use it." I thought, my God, I couldn't have been so lucky. And this lasted for about 5 months. And then I acquired enough points to get on a troop ship. He wanted me to stay longer, But the troop ship had come in, and I says, sir, I says, as much as I enjoyed working with you, and you gave me the opportunity to have this luxurious capacity here, I'm anxious to go home. I've been away now almost 2 years.
Do you remember his name?
Yes, I remember it was General McGaw, Edwin McGaw, and he was from New Mexico. Yeah, he's a nice man. I've got pictures of him at my album at home. He's a nice gentleman.
Other than Tom, did you make any lasting friendships?
Oh, heavens yes.
In the,
Absolutely. I met Tom Morosky. Tom Morosky grew up on the east side of Detroit. I did not know him until the day we were inducted into the service. And Tom was a nice young man, Catholic like I am. And we got separated in the Philippines. And the way we got separated was because we were always together through those latter months. But one night we were sitting in our tent and we were getting our mail, backup mail. And the letter that I got mentioned the fact that his mother had died suddenly, and that my parents, who were writing me this letter, told me that they had gone to the funeral home that night before. And now Tom apparently was not notified of this. And I asked him, I says, Tom, did you get any kind of information about your mother? He says, no, what's the matter? Why you ask that? I gave him the letter to read. And it's the first mention that he had known that his mother had passed away. I took him over to a priest who was in the area, and we mentioned this fact to him, of course. Make a long story short, he got an emergency furlough. He couldn't get home in time for the funeral, but it allowed him to be discharged on that basis, because the war had ended already, and he got home before I did. I can take my water here. That's more water than I got on the boat. One other good friend I have lives up in Kalamazoo, Tom Spickett's. To this day, we're the best of friends. Still the best of friends. We see each other regularly. My friend Tom Sherhut lives down in a little town called Lady Lakes, which is south of Ocala in Florida. He lives there year-round now, but we see him regularly. He comes up here to Lansing because his family resides in Lansing, and they come up here and spend the month of August in Lansing, so we see each other at that time. We go down to Florida for about 3 weeks in March, and we always stop by to see him and spend a couple of days with him down there. We're still on very good close terms. We call each other regularly. My wife and I are godparents to his children. He had 5 children. We had 5 children. He stood up at my wedding. I stood up at his wedding, and they're godparents to our children. Tom Spickett's, as I say, is very close to me, and he lives up in Kalamazoo. Tom Morosky, the one who came home on that emergency furlough, I actually introduced him to his wife, Agnes, who was a cousin of my wife. And the way that came about, she wanted somebody to write letters to, so she wrote to me, and she sent a pin-up picture of her, and I showed it to Tom, and he said, "Boy, she's a nice-looking gal." I said, "Oh yeah, she sure is." I said, I knew my wife before I went into service, and I says, "Happens to be a cousin of my wife, not my wife at that time, my girlfriend." And he said, "Wow." He says, "Do you mind if I take that picture when I go get back? I'd like to look her up." I said, "Sure, I'll even give you her address." Make a long story short, they ended up becoming very, very close, and they got married and got 2 children.
Well, when you went into the service,
Yeah.
You were inducted.
Yeah.
You went to Sheridan and then
Yeah.
Riley and then
Yeah.
Fort Ord. Are there any unique experiences that you can think of in your training, or?
Unique experiences there? Actually, I don't know if you call it unique. It's always unique to be able to ride a horse in that area, you know. That was very nice. I remember Junction City, which was a small town not more than a few miles from Fort Riley. They had the parade there. We were in the parade with the horses. When we were out at Fort Ord, it was at Christmas time. And we went to the Hollywood Casino, and we saw some of the important actors and actresses at that time. That was nice to do. That would be just about it.
How'd you communicate with your family while you were
Letter.
still in the States?
Always letters.
Always
My
letters.
mother wrote me a letter every single day I was gone. And when I was declared, they got a missing in action notice in February, at the time we were sunk. And thank goodness, when we were picked up and placed in that hospital at Perth, a Red Cross nurse came into my room, into my bed there, and asked me, would you like to send a telegram to your parents? I said, oh God, are you kidding? Sure I would. That telegram arrived at my home, my mother and father's home, the day after the telegram which came from the government. And the legitimate telegram which notified my parents that we were picked up arrived 30 days later. If it hadn't been for the one from the Red Cross, my mother and father, my parents and my friends and whoever would not have been notified that we were picked up and safe for 30 days after we were torpedoed. So that was very, very, very important to us, of course. I obviously have both those. I have the one from the government, and I have the one from the Red Cross in my scrapbook.
Of the, the food at that time, what type of food did you have while you were in basic training?
Basic training?
And your advanced training?
Can't complain.
Can't
complain. No, we could not complain. We had good food. Absolutely good food.
How about on the ship?
On the ship,
On the Liberty ship.
On the Liberty ship, we had food that was prepared on the ship, just like it would be if you were in the Navy. It wasn't bad food. No, it was good. No, it was good food.
What'd you get your Purple Heart for?
Purple Heart because we were injured in the sinking, torpedoing. I had suffered a little from immersion foot because of the exposure to the water, and I had some lacerations from the time when we were torpedoed, actually. So those were wounds incurred in action.
In your bio, you have that you received the victory.
Well, everybody
citation.
got that victory citation. Anybody that was participating in the war as an active soldier, whether it was Navy, Marine, Army, whatever, the fact that we won the war, we were given that victory medal.
And I also noticed that you got out of the service as a staff sergeant.
Yes, I was a staff sergeant. Yeah.
Is that what they would currently call an E6?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a one rocker.
No, sir. I'm sorry. It's 3 and a 1 under.
Right.
A 1 rocker.
One rocker.
3. 1, 2, 3.
Right, 3 chevrons.
And 1 under. Yeah. And I got that. I was given that by that general. He said, "You did such a nice job for us, Mr. Laenen." Private, I was a corporal at that time. And then I was just a sergeant. And he said, "I'm going to make you staff before you go home." I said, "Well, thank you very much, General. I appreciate it."
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, being at that stage in your military career,
Yeah.
it was pretty good advancement.
It was nice. It sure was 3 years to get a staff sergeant
Sure.
out of it. Mm-hmm.
Sure. When you got back to the States, what did you do for the rest of your...
Well, I came back to my home, and my wife my future wife, I should say, because I had known my wife, believe it or not, ever since I was 12 years old and she was 10 years old. And the families grew close to each other, nicely. And so I would see her periodically, you know, as we were growing up. But she lived in St. Clair Shores and I lived in Detroit. And so when I went into the service, I was 18 years old and she was 16 years old. Now at that point, you know, there's 2 years difference, and at that stage of your life, 2 years makes quite a difference. I think you will recognize. I know I did, because when I came home 2 years later, she was beautiful when I left, but she was extremely beautiful when I came home, and I was smitten all over again. And so we were engaged. I was in 1940s. Came home in 1946. And in 1947 we became engaged, and in 1949 we were married. February 1940. It'll be 55 years in February, the 19th.
And you mentioned you had 5 children.
I had 5 children.
How'd you support them?
How did I support them? Okay, you asked me what I did. Well, first of all, I went to school. I got my degree under the GI Bill, and I first started out working for an adding machine and cash register company at Soap called Clary Multiplier. And I did that for a couple of years, and then I went to work for an automotive supply company, Motor Products Corporation. They were over on the east side. Ironically, they were only about 2 blocks from where I grew up. And I was there as an assistant auditor. And I did that for about 4 years. And in 1956, when they liquidated that company, I went to work for a steels company, because in one of my jobs at Motor Products it was during the Korean War, in the early part of my tenure there, and they needed somebody to. We were doing business with 12 different steel companies, and they wanted somebody to act as a mediator between the company, Motor Products, and the various steel companies. Big steel company, Bethlehem Steel, Great Lakes, Allegheny Ludlam, Ford Rouge, and those companies. And I did that, and when they liquidated the company, I had to find another job. At that point, I had 5 children already. And I had a chance of working 3 different jobs. One was with New York Life, one as a purchasing director for Cummins Diesel down in Columbus, Indiana, and then the third one was as a steel salesman for Trevor Steel. And I selected the Trevor Steel one, and I did that for 6 years, and then eventually went into business for myself with another partner, and we had that business for 30 years. We sold it in 1990, and I retired in 1991.
Where'd you go to school when you got out of the service?
Detroit Business University.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that still in existence, do you know?
DBI, it is,
DBI.
believe it or not.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a degree in accounting and commercial science.
Okay. And I noticed that you're still living in St. Clair Shores.
Oh yeah, still living in the home that that's actually the old family home of my wife.
Darned.
Yeah, that home was built in 1926, and upon our marriage, my mother-in-law was divorced, and she and my wife were living there together. And when I was always very close to my future mother-in-law, because we'd known each other practically all of our adult life. And so when we decided we were going to get married and the date was set, she said, "Where are you going to live?" I said, "We're going to get an apartment. We'll get an apartment." She says, "Well, if you get an apartment, that means you're going to, Norma's going to have to leave here. I can't live here all alone." And I said, "What are you suggesting?" She said, "Well, why don't you stay here for a while, at least to get started?" And as I say, the relationship between us was so beautiful. I mean, I was like a son to her, and she was like a mother to me. And my parents were so close to their parents, her parents. Make a long story short, we filled that house up with 5 children in 6 years. And we're still living there. Grandma stayed with us all till the day she died at the age of 89 years old. It was a beautiful relationship. I was like a son. I was closer to her than her son was to her. And it worked out beautifully. We raised 5 children over there. It couldn't have been any nicer. It really is. It's a beautiful home. You might even know where the home is. It's on Jefferson Avenue on the lake between 11 and 12 Mile Road. It's a big stone home. They call it the castle.
The castle. Okay, at this point, I think we've done a pretty good job or you've done a pretty good job on relaying to us your experiences. I have no additional questions unless you have something else you want to put on the record.
The only thing that I would like to, if I may interject at this time, is that my service experience, even though I had this experience, was actually a wonderful experience. It allowed me to participate in a war which was so important at that time. Here we were fighting the Axis, Germany, Japan. And in the initial stages of World War II, it was very, very serious. And it could have actually meant that they could have defeated the Allies. And thank God for the United States and the other allies, Britain and the allies, that we were able to defeat these 2 important nations, Germany and Japan. And if it took an atomic bomb to accomplish this, so be it. So be it. Because even though hundreds of thousands died in that terrible, terrible conflagration, it was necessary to do it in order to end the war. Because this country we're living in today, and the freedom that we enjoy today, would not be ours had the Axis defeated the Allies.
Well, we, from RSJP, we'd like to thank you for coming in today and participating.
My pleasure.
And also for your service.
My pleasure. Thank you
And,
for complimenting me.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank
And,
you. It was my pleasure.
we shall get this to the Library of Congress.
That's very nice. Is there any chance that I might get a copy of this?
You will get it.
Oh, good, good.